Peace, infinite waters diving deep once again. We have a very special guest, the incredible Lenon Honor. If you don't know about Lenon Honor, I don't know where you've been. For those that don't know who he is, Lenon Honor is a writer, musician, video producer, talk show host, and counselor. His website, www.lennonhonor.com, has provided a wealth of information and inspiration in regards to manhood, fatherhood, spirituality, positive relationships, subliminal manipulation, marriage, the entertainment industry, children, family, and personal growth. Lenon's books include Writings for the Fathers of the World of Tomorrow, written to inspire current and future parents and to encourage healthy relationships between fathers and sons. The second book, Deep in the Garden of Consciousness, delves into metaphysics, spirituality, and consciousness. His most recent book is entitled The 911 Fear-Based Mind Control Program. Uh-oh. Welcome. It's been a long time. For those, we go back.
Yes, many years now.
And
Many years.
it's great to see what you're doing with all your powerful work. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, and congratulations to you. I was on your YouTube page about 2 days ago, and what you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And I remember when we going back years ago when I first met you and seeing your progressions, it has inspired me. So thank you so much.
And check out Lennon's YouTube channel, Lenon Honor, a host, so much great information right there. We're going to get right into it. And this is called The Secret to Subconscious Mind Control. And just seeing your latest series on the 911 Fear-Based Mind Control program leading up to September 11th, I was blown away. But before that, how did your awakening come about?
It's still coming about.
It's still coming.
And as you know, it's a process. It really is a process. And, from the time that we're conceived until, we get to however old we are, we learn different things. We have different levels of awareness. We come into different levels of understanding, and our perceptions change too. And I think for me, in my humble journey, as I've progressed, I've gained certain insights into different degrees of manipulation that's taking place on the planet. And I want to stress too, when I say manipulation, that the manipulation, it's mainly psychological, meaning that it's impacting the human mind. And what I talk about in my teachings is that the human mind is the closest thing to that which is spirituality. And so if you can manipulate a person's mind, you can actually manipulate their communication with their spiritual self. So when we talk about, when I came to a point where I began to understand these types of things, in part it was the journey, but then also with analysis in terms of media manipulation, and then understanding why certain types of manipulation is taking place. And then when you understand why it's taking place, you get to the deeper issue that it has more to do with causing people to look external of themselves and perceive power to be outside of themselves, as opposed to internalizing their power. And that's pretty much, where I'm at now with my level of understanding, and it's going to grow. So I haven't quite arrived yet, but I'm in my process.
Right, right. And we can all feel this massive shift happening right now on the planet. You talk of the global motion picture stage show.
Mhm.
And what is that exactly?
Yes, it's like, some of us, we go to the movies to watch, movies. Some people go to the theater, and there's different types of movies. There's action films, there's horror films. Some people like to watch that stuff. And, there's, suspense and drama and the love films. And there's different types of movies too. There's like B movies, there's A movies, there's Hollywood films, there's YouTube films, like the types that you do. Phenomenal work. There's also Hollywood films, and there's Hollywood blockbuster films. And each one of these has like different levels. The amount of people that it's impacting, how much budget is going into each one, how much resources, how much manpower and moon power goes into it. And the idea is that it captures the imagination of the viewer. And that's the idea, is to capture the imagination of the viewer. And what I realized is that just as there's different types of movies that capture the imagination of the viewer, there's also a global motion picture stage show that is far more profound than all of the other movies combined and all the different types of movies combined. And what that is that people tend to tune in to what I call the global motion picture stage show, and they perceive it to be 100% real. And really what it is mass media's programming, more specifically what we see in the mainstream and the alternative news. And the profound thing about it is that a great deal of the programming that is issued through mainstream and alternative, it's not real or substantive, and it's not personally relevant to people, but because mass media captures people's imagination, they begin to think that it's personal to them, and they begin to focus on things outside of themselves, and they externalize power to these things. And the difference is that when we go to a movie, we walk out of the theater and we may say to ourselves, okay, I understand that it was just entertainment and it wasn't 100% true. The difference is when people tune into the global motion picture stage show, that's the mainstream and alternative news, they walk away from it and they say, it's all real, it's 100% true. And the truth of the matter is that a great percentage of what is reported on in the mainstream and alternative news is simply fabricated. And that holds profound implications because now people are investing their energies, they're focusing on things that are not necessarily substantive or real or relevant to their personal reality. And this functions as, it's almost like, you take people's energy away by having them focusing on illusions as opposed to them focusing in on what's taking place inside their own life, what's taking place inside of themselves, what's taking place with their families, with their loved ones, so forth and so on. So this is the global motion picture stage show, and it has a far more profound impact on the global population. In point of fact, it has a profound impact on human consciousness on planet Earth, because a lot of us are being misdirected to focus on illusions as opposed to looking within and dealing with what's taking place inside of us.
Amazing. I remember years ago watching your videos, and all your documentaries are so powerful, but just the way that you break down videos is phenomenal, just to see how subliminal messages are embedded in so much of what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk of media manipulation of the masses, how does the media psychologically manipulate people?
Mm-hmm. Yes, excellent question. The psychological manipulation is not designed to impact human beings consciously, because the human being's conscious awareness is far more profound than any degree of manipulation. In point of fact, our conscious awareness is closer to spirituality. Okay, so the human mind, that conscious aspects that reaches beyond our aspect, that reaches beyond what I call autonomic functioning, that it's not manipulable. You can't manipulate that because it's too powerful. So what mass media does is it focuses in on the subconscious mind. And it's not that the subconscious mind isn't powerful, because it's quite powerful. It is that the subconscious mind, most people, in terms of their awareness of what's taking place on the subconscious level, they're oblivious to it. So the point being is that in terms of the manipulation, mass media, more specifically mainstream and alternative news, they focus in on subconscious manipulation. And there's particular techniques that can be used. And one of the major techniques that is used to tap into the subconscious mind is to cause levels of conscious confusion. So let me explain this real quickly here. We have a conscious awareness which allows us to reach beyond our autonomic functioning. The autonomic functioning is what we are bestowed upon as biological entities. And as biological entities, we're no different than any other animal on planet Earth. And so we have subconscious programming. It's like DNA programming, and we operate based upon this programming. This programming is very easily manipulated. You can manipulate people in a particular way and they will react automatically. And it's basically subconscious programming. They're not reacting consciously. They're not making a conscious choice. It's a subconscious reaction to external stimuli. So this subconscious, or this autonomic functioning, there's also this component that we have spiritually that allows us to reach beyond the autonomic functioning. And this is where we begin to infuse levels of spiritual understanding as to our physical existence. In other words, our physicality, our biological vessel now can be guided beyond its autonomic functioning, and now we can begin to perceive the spiritual dimension of our existence. We begin to conceptualize things consciously. In other words, now the biological entity that we call human being, which is just like any other animal, comes into a level of conscious awareness. That conscious awareness, it cannot be manipulated. But what you can do is you can manipulate the subconscious mind, and then the subconscious mind begins to influence people's behavior pattern. Okay, so having that said, the conscious mind is always seeking to define undefined elements and to solve problems. And that is like a spiritual thing. It's like we want to solve problems. We want to define anything that's undefined, and we want to solve problems so that we can live a better life experience here on planet Earth. It's a conscious thing. Whenever the conscious mind cannot define an undefined element or solve a problem, the subconscious mind kicks in and takes that particular issue. And really what happens is when we cannot define an undefined element or solve a problem, we experience a level of psychological trauma. And that psychological trauma, in terms of the subconscious mind, it activates, takes that trauma and submerges it within the subconscious mind and begins to work on it subconsciously. And therefore, consciously, we can move on and continue with our daily life without focusing in on this problem or this undefined element or undefined element or unresolved problem. So what I'm getting at is that a lot of the different degrees of psychological trauma is submerged in the subconscious mind. And what mass media does is it impacts the conscious mind so that the conscious mind experiences different levels of psychological trauma. And in that way, that trauma itself is submerged within the subconscious mind. Now you gain access to the subconscious mind. So I hope this is making sense. So in other words, it's not a direct impact to the conscious mind. Really what it is issuing programming to cause the conscious mind to experience psychological trauma so that that particular trauma is submerged within the subconscious mind, and that whatever that program is that causes the conscious mind to experience psychological trauma, it's embedded within the subconscious mind, and now it functions as a program within the subconscious mind. So you can issue programming that is conflictive to the conscious mind. There's different ways of doing this. Subliminal messages do the same thing. It is conflictive. Your conscious mind cannot define the undefined element to experience a level of psychological trauma, and then it is submerged within the subconscious mind. And whatever that program was, now it's embedded within the subconscious mind, and people are oblivious to it consciously. And then now it festers there, and then it begins to influence people's behavior pattern. So this is how, in terms of the psychological manipulation, it's not so much to impact the conscious mind, it's really to gain access to the subconscious mind. And once you gain access to the subconscious mind, now you're tapping into the animalistic nature, the autonomic functioning, and that is very easily manipulated. And that's why a lot of people, in terms of media manipulation, stories come out and people react. You know, stories come out and people react. It's not conscious, but what's taking place is through different levels of psychological manipulation and to cause different levels of psychological confusion and therefore psychological trauma, that whatever the program is that is being issued, it ultimately is embedded, because the subconscious mind, it ultimately seeks to protect the conscious mind from experiencing psychological trauma. It takes the trauma, submerges it there. And a lot of us, we're basically operating based upon subconsciously embedded traumas as opposed to what we would call spirituality itself, which is conscious awareness. Well, that's where we get into human consciousness.
Fascinating stuff. And it's just amazing just to see this massive shift happening on planet Earth. We can all feel it. I remember years ago talking to someone and they said they don't have a TV. I thought they were crazy. Now, the more you begin to delve deeper, you realize, wow, that was the wisest thing they could have done. Because when we look at the TV, what I've found on my journey is that we have to be careful of the TV simply because that's where we get most of our ideas about the world from. Mm-hmm. And it's not normal for us to be seeing things at 24 frames per second, because all of that information is going, like you said, into our subconscious. So from watching your videos, I've seen you talk about certain strategies the media use. And what are the top media manipulation strategies?
Top media manipulation. Before I answer that, let me say this.
Go for it.
One of the most important things that I've ever done in my life was to get rid of the television. And not only for me and my life, but for my family's life. Okay, so you know, brother, because we go back years now.
Right.
We've had a couple of more babies since you and I met. Okay,
congratulations.
My wife and I, we have 5 beautiful babies, and we've been married for 12 years, and no fussing and fighting, no arguing, none of that. And see, a lot of that fussing and fighting, that's subconscious programming too. Okay, it's not natural for us to do that when we love someone. We don't argue, we don't fuss, we don't fight, we don't hurt each other with words. We don't issue psychological warfare in the form of conversations that ultimately elevate our language, elevate our voice, and ultimately now we're in a state of arguing, yelling, and screaming at each other. That's not what love is about. A lot of that is basically a lot of that we get from programming, and a lot of that programming comes from television, movies, also from parents passed down. But where did they get it from? Okay, so this TV thing is huge. But one of the most important things I ever did for myself was to get rid of TV. And also for my family to get rid of the television. My 3 youngest children, the oldest being 6 of the 3, the oldest being 6, the youngest being 2, they don't even know what a television is. And then my oldest two boys, they know what a television is, but they've never watched broadcast TV, and they've never watched commercials or any of that kind of stuff. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want people to understand the impact that something as simple as taking out one of the most manipulative tools ever known to man, taking it out of your home, even on an energetic level. Okay, we need to look at it psychologically, but even just on an energetic level, it's a total shift. And so we haven't had a TV in the home for over 7 years. And prior to that, for 2 years prior to that, we didn't actually have it. We were watching television. We just had it with a DVD player. So we're talking about 9 years without broadcast television. And I'm going to tell you all, if you want to maturate your human experience, if you want to experience higher levels of love in your life and more peace in your life, you got to get that beast out of your house. Okay,
do it. You won't regret it.
Yeah, you won't, and you will never look back. You look at things in a whole new. It's just ultimate beauty. Okay, you get it out of your house. It's ultimate beauty. So some of the main techniques that are employed by mass media to manipulate human consciousness, and again, it's to tap into the subconscious mind by confusing you consciously, and also to stimulate levels of fear in you. Because whenever you experience fear, it compromises your intellectual process, it compromises your conscious mind, and then it accesses your subconscious mind. All of our memories are stored in our subconscious mind. Even our emotions are largely tied to past experiences that are submerged within the subconscious mind. That's why you can trigger people based upon past experiences, and those emotions begin to come up. But those emotions aren't conscious; those emotions are subconscious emotions that are associated with past trauma. Let me just give a couple of the main ones. One of the ones that I call it media saturation, and that is to say that if you have a global population tuning into a television, and they're watching news, and they flip the channel, and they go to each channel, and it's talking, and they go to each one of the news stations, and the same thing is being talked about, and this takes place. It doesn't matter where you go: CNN, BBC, Reuters, Fox, Al Jazeera. It doesn't matter. You go each, and they're talking about the same thing, and then they do this for 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 days. That's media saturation. And what happens is that whenever people begin to feel, and again, it's externally derived, to focus on the external, and then I call it PR, perceived relevance. You begin to perceive it to have relevance to you, and the more you see it, the more relevant it becomes, and ultimately now it becomes personal, even though it has nothing to do with you. This is one of the major techniques employed, and it's in media saturation. Another one is repetition. That is, if you repeat something over and over again, even if it's not true, even if there's no evidence or proof to prove it to be true, people tend to begin to believe it after a while. It's like, Santa Claus. People believe that there was a Santa Claus, but basically their parent lied to them and told them, that Santa Claus, if you do right, Santa Claus is going to bring you gifts. And children actually believe that stuff. And then later on in life, the child has an awakening.
Right.
And they're like, wait a minute, but why did they believe it in the first place? Well, they believed it because media manipulation, but coming from their parents in essence. See, it's interesting because parents, they may lie to their child and make them believe in things without any evidence or proof. Well, that's precisely the relationship between most adults on planet Earth as it relates to mainstream and alternative media, the news in particular. They perceive it to be the authority figure, which is another technique. Oftentimes what mass media does is establish people in the media as authorities. And once you establish that as authority, now people are more likely to believe in them. I don't know why exactly, but for whatever reason, you're authority. I got to believe in them.
Just wear a suit.
Yeah, they wear a suit. Or I have this inside my book. There's particular phrases that are used. And I want to just express this to everyone, because this is how you know that if you want to understand how you're being manipulated, or if you're watching the news and you want to say, okay, is this story true? Am I being manipulated? One of the things you can do is you can listen for particular words that are used. And one of the things that I found to be quite fascinating in my journey in terms of analyzing media is that they often issue legal statements. And these legal statements absolve them of any legal repercussions from reporting on fanciful, made up, contrived, or inaccurate reports. And I want people to understand that a great deal of what's reported on in the news is just like any other movie. They cater to a particular demographic of people, and a lot of the information that is produced is fanciful, meaning that it's not true, it's not backed by evidence or proof. Oftentimes it's exaggerated. That's another one of the techniques. You exaggerate things, and it builds a drama factor. But if you go to the news, and if you just listen to how they report on things, and this is on page 33 of my book, whether it is the mainstream news or the alternative news, you will often hear the phrase "officials say." prior to any given report. Y'all go check it out for yourself. Okay, this is what I mean. I've been analyzing this for so long. You start to see the pattern. Okay, you start to pick up on the program, and you can actually predict it. Not only can you predict the types of the verbiage that is going to be used, you can, and I do this inside the book. You can actually predict the types of stories that are going to come out in advance of them coming out, because it's based upon cycles. One other thing I want to mention too is mass media operates based upon cycles. Everything is cyclical, and the reason why is because cycles access the subconscious mind. You see, the conscious mind operates A to B linearly. The subconscious mind, it operates in cycles. It's like a spiral. So you have to issue programming that runs in cycles. And whenever you're running in cycles, that means that you can determine it in advance. And in the book, I determine it in advance every single year within the 6 weeks leading up to September 11th. Particular story starts to come inside the news about terrorism, Al Qaeda, so forth and so on. It's all inside the book and perfectly predictable. Here we are. Okay, so, but let me just share this real quickly here. The phrase official say, it's a legal statement that absolves a news agency from being subject to any legal action stemming from inaccurate or disingenuous reporting. In other words, by saying official say, the news agency can no longer be held legally accountable for the information that is being shared with the masses. The premise of the legal statement is that the news is merely reporting information that was provided by an undefined official. Therefore, if the information is inaccurate, it would not be because of an error on the part of the news agency. It would be because of an error on part of the unidentified official. Y'all see the manipulation here? So consequently, the news agency is summarily absolved from any legal action stemming from the undefined official's inaccurate or disingenuous information. Here is a list of some of the most commonly used legal statements issued by both the mainstream news and the alternative news so as to absolve themselves of inaccurate or disingenuous reporting. So if you're watching the news, if you hear any of the following statements, understand that you're being manipulated, and understand that it's probable that those stories are simply fabricated, exaggerated, or simply untrue. Okay, fabricated, contrived, untrue, or exaggerated. All those things, those four things, those are protocols for manipulation. So here's some of those. Officials say,
right.
Authorities say, right? Sources say that such and such and such and such. Experts say, a high-ranking official says. Have you heard these ones? It doesn't matter where you go. You can go to BBC, it's all over the place. You can go to Al Jazeera, you can go to ABC, CNN, it does not matter. A high-ranking official in the White House says. Law enforcement agents say. Doctors say. And this all, because it sets up this dynamic of a hierarchy. Okay, this is an authority, now you have to believe. And you have to believe even if there's no evidence and proof, because scientists say, or officers say, or a spokesman say.
Right.
And this
right.
this one really gets me. An anonymous source said. What is that?
That's the new
So now
one.
we're believing in fairy tales. An anonymous source, you don't know who it is. Lawyers say, official documents state, official reports say, studies show, U.S. officials say, U.S. officials report. Military officials say, high-ranking military officers say. And again, these legal statements
one has
the
to really keep open. And
yes.
what I've found as well, because we can also talk about the colors they use, and I've seen you illustrate that in your videos, how red is danger.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Colors, how important that is. But moving on, let's talk about the information age. And right now on the planet, you have the alternate truth movement going on, where you have people who are also independent journalists who are gathering information. And how do you feel the alternate truth movement is different from the mainstream media?
As I outlined inside my book, there's a distinction that we have to make between mainstream news, alternative news, and independent. And oftentimes independent researchers are engulfed or kind of placed within the category of the alternative. And I think that that's something that we have to look at critically. And the reason why is because ultimately the compromisation of our intellectual processes occur whenever we are put in a state of fear. And this is a dynamic that people truly underestimate the impact that fear, the emotion of fear has on us as a biological entity here on planet Earth. Fear stifles the intellectual process. Fear, and in that it stifles the intellectual process, it compromises the intellectual process. Therefore, that which is the closest thing to our spiritual self is also compromised. So in essence, there's a spiritual dynamic to this, a metaphysical principle here in terms of what fear does to us, in terms of us connecting to our spiritual self, if you will, or our spiritual self, if you want to look at it in reverse, our spiritual self connecting to our biological self. Okay.
Right.
As a biological entity, that element of fear really shuts down the biospiritual interface. That is the mind. See, the mind, it is a biospiritual interface. It's not quite biological. It is not quite spiritual. It's somewhere in between. It is the interface between the biological realm, our physical vessel, and the spiritual realm, our spiritual vessel, if you will. And it's the interface. So if you can shut down the mind, then you shut down this interplay or this exchange of information between the spiritual and the physical, or the physical and the spiritual. Okay. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because fear actually compresses and begins to shut down the biospiritual interface. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the mainstream news, it mainly issues programming to stimulate fear in people. That's why if you go on to any of the mainstream news outlets, and you will find that much of the content, anyone, you can do that now. You go to CNN, you go to BBC, you go to Reuters, you go to Fox, whatever. It doesn't matter where you go and look at the headlines. It's all fear-based programming. It's about death, destruction, war, and gore. Death, destruction, war, and gore. This functions as a matrix of fear, and that fear compromises people's intellectual processes, and it also shuts down their biospiritual interface. Okay. Now, what mainstream news does is issues programming to cause fear, but also it never provides solutions. So people are stuck in a perpetual state of fear. When you look at the alternative media, a lot of that programming does the same thing. Okay, now I'm not talking about independent, because I outlined this inside the book too. There's a difference between, see, oftentimes independent researchers were grouped into the alternative. But I want people to understand that the alternative news, it still issues fear-based programming. You go to any of the alternative news, truth movement mouthpieces, and all about death, destruction, war, and gore. But it's always externalized to some kind of a conspiracy. So in other words, something like, the Illuminati or Freemasons or reptilian shapeshifters. It's all about externalizing your power onto something else, but also to stimulate fear in people. And it compromises our intellectual processes, but also it shuts down the biospiritual interface to where now we're not receiving the spiritual transmission from our spiritual self, and vice versa, our spiritual self receiving the biological transmission from our biological self. So the point being is that we have to be very careful about this. And then, so you have the mainstream news, you have the alternative news. Both are fear-based programming. Both cause people to externalize power, and both are problem oriented. In other words, it reports on problem but no solutions. But then there's another category. Okay, so I want people to understand, even if you may have felt as if you were alternative in a mainstream, they're just two hands that are attached to the same body, and they appeal to particular demographics, but in the end, it's still fear-based mind control programming. It's still causing people to externalize power, and it's all about reporting on problems. But then there's another category, and that is the independent research. And I consider myself to be independent. I consider what you do to be independent profoundly. In your independence, you have managed to produce some very profound videos on your YouTube page. And anyone who goes over there, you get addicted. It's like, wow, this is awesome.
Likewise.
But there's a reason why, because you are issuing empowering information, not fear-based. It's about empowering people. And it's also causing people to what? Internalize power. I'm big on that. You are causing people to internalize power. Even as I'm saying that, it's just powerful for me to even, like, I'm feeling that, like, to internalize power. And then you also offer solutions. See, the mainstream media and the alternative, they don't do that. So I want people to understand, you got to make the distinction between the two, because oftentimes, even in my own journey, I went from the mainstream news and believing a lot of what they were saying, but always in a state of fear. Then I moved into the alternative, and I was even more fearful in the alternative than I was in the mainstream.
Well, that's what I love about your work, because it's solution orientated, and you feel empowered. When I'm watching your videos, you always give solutions, and I always say, let love guide you, not fear. And your great slogan, I want my vision back. That's the classic slogan. So powerful. I remember Lenon holding a cardboard piece in his hands, and it said, I want my vision back. So powerful, because those words, wow, that's all I can say. So how do we regain our vision back? That's the big thing. People are wondering, okay, we know about this, but how do we protect ourselves from the manipulation out there? How do we get our vision back? Because it's all about solutions right now.
Yes. And just like I outlined inside my book, the non-fear-based mind control program, I give three things to heal from that particular trauma, but those three things can be applied to any level of our life. And I've been talking about this on my live video stream, Visions of Manhood, that really, for me at this point in my progression, in my journey, it's about purification. And that means purification of body, purification of mind, purification of words, purification of actions, purification of my role in my household, purification of my relationship to my wife, my relationship to my children, even my relationship to you. You know, purification in to whatever capacity that I can engage in at this point in my journey. That's what it's all about. So the same thing applies in terms of solutions for our life existence. Is really about purification. So if you're engaging in media, manipulative media sources, or media artifacts that is causing you to experience levels of fear, that is diminishing your vibratory field, that is causing you, that is shutting down your bio-spiritual interface, that is causing you to have doubts about yourself, or to have doubts about humanity, or to have doubts about the spiritual evolution of the species, or the spiritual evolution of the planet, you have to purify that out of your space. That gets back to what you were saying earlier about the TV. If you got that in the house, get it out of your house.
Get it out.
That's a solution. Same thing with the internet. Purify your media stream. That's one of the things that I talk about inside the book as a solution. Purify your media stream. Anything that is putting you in a state of fear, anything that is causing you to look at life in a macabre, dark, sinister way, purify it out of your space. Because and anything that is bringing negativity and toxicity into your life, you purify it out of your space. Not only the media, but also individuals and people. You purify, and it's not to harm anyone. It's just you purify yourself, and as you purify yourself, they won't have a realm to operate. The thing is that, as for instance, my own children, because they haven't been toxified by media to the degree that I was as a child, if someone presented to them that type of media, it would not even resonate at their frequency. They would not even be they wouldn't be appealing to them. It wouldn't capture their imagination, because they're operating vibratorily speaking on a whole other level. But that's because we protected their purity from birth. Well, for a lot of us, we got so much programming. Now let's go ahead and do right by ourselves. Let's begin to purify our information stream, purify our toxic thoughts, purify those. See, a lot of the programming that I've gotten surfaces. Whenever I go into this purification process, a lot of the programming that I got from media or life experiences that were toxic, they start to surface back in my mind. What's taking place? My mind, my biospiritual interface is bringing these things out of my subconscious to purify them. So that's the first thing, is to purify self, purify your information stream. Also begin to internalize power. That's the most important thing, in my opinion. Because most of the programming that's out there, and we can say that we can blame it on whoever we want to, it doesn't even matter. Because ultimately, if you begin to resonate on a particular frequency, it doesn't impact you anymore, and you've reclaimed your power, you're more powerful than any of it. But you have to, because a lot of the programming causes us to externalize power and to always project power onto other things. Well, now you got to do something different. And what you begin to do is recognize the power within. That's a solution in and of itself. One of the things that happens real quickly here in the mainstream and alternative news is, because it's all based upon problems and there's no solutions are ever produced, most people begin to feel overwhelmed, and they begin to externalize power to such a degree that they don't feel powerful, and they don't even feel like a powerful being on the planet anymore. So that now they're subject to what everyone else has to say. They have to have an authority figure. They have to have someone telling them what to do. That's not the way to empower the species. How we empower the species is one by one, on an individual basis, we begin to internalize power. And the more you do that, you begin to see through the lens not of trauma. You don't see through the lens of trauma. You don't see through the lens of toxicity. You don't see through the lens of media manipulation. You begin to see through the lens of personal empowerment. You begin to see through the lens of spiritual awareness, and you begin to see through the lens of the upliftment of the species. And that's a solution as well. So I would offer those two things. Number one, purify your media streams, purify self, purify thoughts, actions, words, but then also to begin to internalize power. Yeah,
definitely. And that's fantastic. I do a lot of sexology videos, and you do a lot of videos too on relationships. And for me, I feel everything is connected. That's why you and we talk about a whole host of different topics, because once you box yourself in, then you limit yourself. So you talk a lot about manhood, which is fantastic. I did a video called Why Am I Single? And so many people are dealing with relationship issues. This is the biggest thing on the planet, relationships. Yes. So when we talk of what is manhood and how to attract a respectable mate, please give your insights on that. Because we need help. You know, a lot of relationships need to be saved.
It's so true.
And how the media plays into that as well.
Absolutely. My wife and I, we were talking about that yesterday. We have a live video streaming Positive Relationships, and we were talking, because someone said, can you guys watch this movie and give us an idea about what you think about it in terms of male-female relationships?
Right.
And a lot of the programming we get, it causes us to think on levels that are not empowered as it relates to male-female relationships. So a lot of us, in terms of how we think of male-female relationships, is based upon junior high school and high school, because that's when we initially got particular degrees of programming. But you have to transcend that. It's just like with my journey, you have to transcend it. It's just like with your journey. You've gone into skyrocket mode. Okay, we go back to a couple, 3 years ago, brother, and I was, oh, and now where you're at, it's like this brother, he got a time machine or a warp machine or something like that. But what has
Likewise.
happened? What has happened is you have engaged in this process of personal growth and purification, and you have had to transcend particular ideas, thoughts, and so forth and so on. And if people watch your videos, the earlier ones, and they follow you into where you're at now, they see the progressions. It's miraculous. Well, the same thing applies to our perceptions and our mentality about male-female relationships. We have to also grow. And a lot of us, we get stuck within the realm of junior high school, mentality. And that's really tied to childhood. And when you come to a male-female relationship, you got to come as a whole adult, a complete adult. So my wife and I, we were talking about this dynamic in terms of media manipulation and how a lot of the TV shows and a lot of the movies that are produced in terms of male-female relationships, it's based upon this archetype of junior high school level mentality as it relates to male-female relationship. In male-female relationships, I want people to understand that it is the most empowering experience that we can have for various reasons. One of the reasons is because it perpetuates the species. So in terms of us even being here on the planet, for you to be here, two people had to get together. For me to be here, there had to be a male-female relationship. For everyone who was here viewing this, there had to be a male-female relationship that materialized you ultimately. So even in that sense, male-female relationships are key in terms of the perpetuation of the species, but also in terms of what takes place out of male-female relationships. Male-female relationships it almost functions as a mirror of self. In other words, what you have in your space, the relationship that you have with, for instance, my relationship with my wife represents the feminine representation of me. So also any level of iniquity that is in me also begins to become purified because the feminine principle sees it, and I don't see it because it is within me. Vice versa. I see the levels of imperfection in my wife, and I assist her in her purification because now I function as a mirror to her. So it's a very beautiful arrangement. In other words, we function as mirrors to each other, and not only we mirror the best of each other, and we can enhance that, and that's when we get into love and happiness and so forth and so on. But also, the worst of us begins to surface too, but then we can engage in this process of purification. Okay, so male-female relationships are so very important, and one of the things that I stress in terms of male-female relationships is understand that you don't have to necessarily seek a male-female relationship. I have a video dealing with this topic titled "The Pursuit of a Mate," and that is to say that the pursuit of a mate is not about finding a mate. It's really about finding the greater you. In other words, that if you can find the greater you through personal refinement, you will develop the internal gravity. See, this is the key thing. This is quite different than what we call attraction. See, because attraction is based upon someone else being attracted to you, so the external being attracted to you. No, what I'm getting at is internal gravity, because that's internal and it's derived from source, your source. That's what we call the internalization of power. That is gravity that causes things to begin to, now they begin to come and now they're caught in your gravity and they circulate just like the earth circulates around the sun, or the moon circulates. That's all internal gravity. Well, the same thing applies to male-female relationship. Male-female relationship is just a cosmic order playing itself out here on planet Earth in physical form. That is to say that the masculine and feminine energy coalescing to create something and expressing all of existence. Well, that's no different than what we do here on planet Earth. And I'm going to say this: male-female relationship is the most natural thing that's taking place on planet Earth. As a matter of fact, you look around and you see it, and it's in abundance. So the question becomes, why is it that we struggle so much with it? Well, I'm going to explain something to people real quickly. One of the reasons why is because we're always on the pursuit. We're always on the hunt for it, and we always desire it. Right. Not realizing that we're really in pursuit of something that is in abundance and really is internally derived. So what I'm getting at is that what I teach for men and women is, don't worry about attracting a mate, because that's not even the point. The point is discovering or actually improving upon yourself on the internal, so that you can discover your true power, which is internal gravity. And once you develop that internal gravity, all that you desire begins to rotate around you, and it's no effort. The only focus should be on your internal condition. Purify your thoughts, purify your words, purify your actions, purify any ideas about male-female relationships, any ideas about women that may be sexist as a man, any ideas about men that may be derogatory as a woman. Purify them out of your space. And what you do is you begin to develop internal gravity, and now you begin to see. It's like you begin to reclaim your vision. See, the most fascinating thing about this is oftentimes that which we desire is already there and already in our gravity. But because we have not reclaimed our vision through purification, we don't see it. But when you regain your vision through purification, now you see it, and then now you can experience that particular experience that was always there, right there in your face. But ultimately, it's not about pursuing it on the external. It's about pursuing the greater you on the internal, and you develop the internal gravity. I want to encourage you, go check out the video. It's titled "The Pursuit of a Mate." on YouTube, and I provided my insights into that. In terms of male-female relationships, if you can realize the value of looking within and purifying yourself, and going through the process of purification, you will develop the internal gravity. And once you develop the internal gravity, you know what it is that you desire in a male-female relationship, it will materialize. You don't have to make it happen. It happens automatically. Why? Because it's natural and it is in abundance in the universe.
Right, right. And it's that working on yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us, we don't do the work.
Yes.
The moment you
Yes.
start working on yourself and you find the one you love doing what you love. And
Yes.
like you said, you don't have to search because
Yes.
search and you will not find. A lot of us,
That's right.
a lot of us, we're searching for love in the wrong places. You see someone's photo and you say, "Oh my gosh, they've got such a beautiful face," but you don't even know who it is. You see, and we're living in a world based on appearances.
Mm.
And what I wanted to ask you is, you see, a lot of people might say that, talk of soulmates and being connected to a fellow kindred spirit. And some people might say, well, we are all connected and there is no soulmate, just who we're resonating with at that specific time. What's your view on this? Is it like Disney say this?
well, let me just get metaphysical real quickly here, and that is to say that, you know, what people, oftentimes people, they do not look at the domains as the domain should be perceived. Again, this comes back to reclaiming your sight, reclaiming your vision. I want my vision back, and that is to say that we always have to respect the domains. And that is to say that just like as a man, I have to respect my wife's perception of reality as a feminine being. My wife has to respect my perception of reality as a masculine being. We respect each other's domain. And each domain is complete in and of itself. But when we bring those domains together, now we have a whole. I call this the wholeness principle. My wife and I, we call this the wholeness principle. And the reason I'm bringing up domains is because oftentimes spiritually we begin to mix domains, and we begin to look at the physical domain and the spiritual domain, and we try to mix and match. So we may take, you know, concepts that we experience here in the physical domain and we try to apply them to the spiritual. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, for instance, in the physical domain, you know, there's a maturation process, there's a growth process, and because we're dealing with time and space, and the physical, and then we try to, in many of us, we try to apply time to the spiritual domain, but the spiritual domain is timeless, you know. And what I mean by this is we have to respect the domains. Well, in the same sense, when we say soul, what we're dealing with something that is ethereal, and we have to respect that particular domain. So oftentimes what happens because of programming, we misconstrue the concept of a soulmate with something that is taking place here on planet Earth. Again, now let me explain this real quickly here. That is to say that as a soul being, meaning your spiritual self, you can literally go into spiritual contract with many biological entities or biological beings. Okay, that is to say that, you know, one of the beautiful arrangements that this earth made for her children, meaning the human species, was to engage in a spiritual contract between our physical self and that which was spiritual. Always respect the domains, okay? Mm. We're part of a whole, of course, but we're whole in our own identity, in our own physical experience, and in our own spiritual experience. So the great Earth Mother in her wisdom made arrangements for us to go into, as I'm talking about from the vantage point of a biological species, because ultimately in the beginning, we didn't have a level of spiritual awareness, but in order for us to grow beyond our autonomic functioning and begin to assist the great Earth Mother in her spiritual progressions, we had to begin to perceive the spiritual quality of all of existence. And in order for us to begin to perceive that which reached beyond our physicality, spiritual contracts had to be created. And Great Earth Mother, and I talk about this inside my book, she went through the process of initializing these particular spiritual contracts. And therefore, now we were married to a soul, if you will, or to a spiritual entity. Now, this soul or spiritual entity, it is you. It's just the spiritual component of you. I don't want people to think that it's something outside of you, because that too is the externalization of power. No. Just as we, as human beings, we tend to perceive our existence as being strictly biological, and we perceive spirituality to be outside of ourselves. Well, we can actually turn that orientation around and instead see ourselves as a spiritual being, and then our physicality is something that we perceive to be part of ourselves, but not necessarily separate of ourselves. This makes sense? Okay, so let me get back to this, okay? This is to say that we have to respect the domains, and as spiritual beings, as a soul being, if you will, we have the capacity to go into spiritual contract with not just one human being, but with multiple human beings. And in that we can go into spiritual contract with multiple human beings, this brings up the possibility of two of the human beings that we go into spiritual contract with may ultimately come together. So therefore, these two human beings both have a spiritual contract to the same soul being. Well, that's a soul mate.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Oftentimes, because of the programming, we think that the soulmate thing it has something to do with the physicality. No. What that really means is that as a soul being, you have gone into spiritual contract with two individuals, and these two individuals have come together. Well, that's a soulmate. My wife and I. This is what has happened for us. We are two individuals. Our spiritual self went into spiritual contract with Lenon and with Aida, and we happen to come together. And now this is a soulmate. So it's not this Hollywood love story thing. No, it's a metaphysical principle. But oftentimes we misconstrue the metaphysical principle with a physical reality because we do not respect the domains. I want to say one other thing too, real quickly here.
Go for it.
Because the deeper realization for the species, and in point of fact, to assist the great Earth Mother in her spiritual evolution, comes when we begin to really reclaim our sight, to when we begin to see that we are not simply the biological entity, that we are the spiritual entity, and that the spiritual entity has profound power. In point of fact, not only can it go into spiritual contract with beings that exist here on planet Earth, it can go into spiritual contracts with beings that exist on other planets. It can also go into spiritual contract with beings or entities that are not necessarily physical. And what happens is, and this is why the bio-spiritual interface is so important, and this is why this issue of fear and the fear propaganda is such an issue that we really need to dissect. Because ultimately, when you get to a particular point in your progressions, and we're going to get there as a species, it's going to take millennia, but we're going to get there as a species collectively. But as individuals, when we get to this point where we begin to recognize our spiritual quality and our spiritual dimension, not only can our spiritual being access this physical domain through this physical vessel that we call the biological entity, we call the human being, but also we can, as a biological entity, begin to access not only the spiritual illumination of our soul self or our spiritual self, but also all of the information and experiences that soul being has gone into spiritual contract with in terms of all the other beings that it has gone into spiritual contract with. See, this is when we get into levels of enlightenment that are far profound than simply reading books or simply, participating in ritualistic practices. In other words, what we're able to do now is to not only access the spiritual illumination of our soul self, but also all of the wisdom gained by the soul self based upon all of the spiritual contracts that it has gone into, not only in terms of the beings here on planet Earth throughout time, but also on other planets, but then also into other dimensions. See, that's true power. When the species gets to that point, it's going to take millennia. That's why it's like, okay,
it goes deep. It goes deep.
Yeah, it's like people don't. You don't have to rush anything because it's going to take a long time.
Right.
Okay, each generation just build. And what will happen for the species is at a certain point, we will, in terms of internalization of power, we will become profoundly gifted. I mean, we're already profoundly gifted, but I'm saying we will be operating on levels that are so far in advance of what we are operating now as a species. And as a consequence, which is ultimately the dream of the earth, we will assist in that which initialized these spiritual contracts. In other words, we assist the great earth mother in her spiritual progressions. I want to say this, and that is to say that spirituality is not about us as individuals. It's not in the pursuit of that which is spiritual or spirituality. It's not about us. That's a very selfish orientation. It's about assisting our mother. You see, if as a species we can reciprocate our mother giving us life, our mother providing spiritual contracts, so that we begin to perceive the spiritual dimension of our existence. If we can reciprocate, just like all of us should be doing, we should reciprocate to our mother. If we can do that for the great earth mother, now she begins to experience the levels of spiritual illumination that she has for so long wished to experience. And that is the dream of the earth. And we are active participants every single day in this process. It's going to take some time, but we're going to get there.
Well, that's fantastic, because I feel when we talk of love, there's a big difference between love or lust. How do you know if it is love or lust? Because a lot of us, we see someone who's very attractive. This is how nature created us. But at the same time, people get together, then they break up because there's not a deeper intimacy there. So just briefly, how do you feel one can know the difference? Really though.
Love ultimately brings you peace.
Right.
That's what I would say. That love ultimately brings you peace. the infatuation with people and the lust ultimately brings trauma.
Mm,
So
mm.
this to say that, and see, that's what I mean. People, you just learn your lesson. It's just about learning, because we all go on this journey. Just make sure you learn the lesson. If you have a particular experience and you think it's love, but it's based upon lust, and ultimately you experience pain and suffering, then learn the lesson. You should know the difference now, and or at least you should know what brings forth that result. In other words, you should know this type of an orientation or this particular feeling even that I felt when I first began to interact with this person. I need to identify that, learn that lesson, so that you feel the next time you say, okay, I know where this is going in advance. What happens is that when you experience love, it brings you a level of peace and a level of balance. And once you're there, there's no need to go anywhere else.
Mm.
It's almost like finding the great truth. Once you find the great truth, you can finally be at peace. And that's why I'm saying love ultimately brings people peace. So people, anyone, because this is going back to Malcolm relationship, anyone, if your relationship is bringing you trauma, that is because that it is not rooted in love. Okay, that doesn't mean that something can't change and be, in terms of the relationship, it doesn't mean that you can't, change things in a relationship to facilitate more love vibration or love energy. But you got to understand that the fact that there is trauma there, there's pain, there's suffering, it's indicative of a lack of love. Okay, and the truth of the matter is that in that love is an abundance. It's something that we just give. We can give freely. Anyone can at any given time make the choice to experience something different or to give it to someone else. And that's precisely what my wife and I do. We don't argue, fuss, and fight, any of that stuff. We don't even speak of love per se in our relationship, because it's almost like it's the foundation of it all. So there's no need to, it's like the great secret. It's like we don't necessarily have to speak about the love in our relationship or the love in our life or the love in our house. So it's not really necessary. It's the foundation of it all. So people, just learn your lesson. If that particular experience, that particular relationship that was based upon lust, you realize it later on, well, think about the energy that you felt. And then in the next part, next perspective, mate, if you feel that same way, well, that is your body's way of letting you know. That is your intuition's way of letting you know, look, you've already been down this road before. You should learn the lesson. Let's not go down this path before.
Mm.
And what you do is you purify that experience out of your space. You clear the space. And the more space you clear, the more purification, the more time you take off, you prepare, and the more internal work you do to develop the internal gravity, the next time around, love is coming knocking.
Fantastic. And just the last segment is the power of embracing nature. And I see you
Oh,
have
yes.
done some great videos in the beautiful Californian mountains and deserts. Fantastic. Just to see you in nature, you seem so comfortable, and your videos are so powerful in nature as well as indoors, but even more so in nature, because everything is flowing. What is the importance of reconnecting back with nature for humanity
Oh,
right now?
yes.
Because a lot of us, we're in this concrete jungle, like Bob Marley said, we're running up and down. And a
A
lot
rat
of us,
race,
we
yeah.
need to just slow down, because we need to just relax into ourselves.
Yes, and I'm going to say that you inspired me to get back out in nature. Okay, because your videos, what you're doing is just absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's times where you've done your videos and you're talking, and you can tell it's cold out there because you can see your breath. I'm like, this brother, he's getting out here. It's freezing, but he's gonna get out in nature to do these videos. That's some serious dedication. So I was inspired by that, and I've been doing more nature videos in nature. And we have premium membership on Lenon.com. Every single week, I upload a new video on nature, and I talk about a specific topic, addressing different elements in terms of personal purification and personal refinement, spirituality, metaphysics. Nature, Mother Nature, puts everything into perspective. Okay, so in other words, when we're in the hustle and bustle of life, and we're all stressed out, and we're in this rat race. Okay,
Right.
this is a rat race. Right,
It
right.
goes
It's
like that.
on that hamster wheel, and everything that goes along with it. Even getting on the internet and having to deal with certain types of people, it can be a challenge sometimes. That's one of the beautiful things about you is you know, you just keep it flowing. You just keep it flowing. I even seen all your videos are positive, but there's a couple of videos I've seen. It's the same guy. He always has something negative to say. And you don't feed into that. See, for me, I haven't purified to the same degree as you, because I'll feed into it. I'm working on that myself. You see,
Right.
but I'm inspired by that. But the point being is that nature, this element of nature, it brings that level of balance out in people, to where even when people try to bait you into going into a particular negative direction, you don't go there. You have progressed spiritually to the point where you're able to handle that to a greater degree than I'm able to, but I'm inspired by the fact that you're able to do that. And one thing that nature is doing is, for me at least, is putting that type of an interaction into perspective. The reason I'm bringing this, and it puts it into its appropriate context. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when we're dealing with the world and everything that is in the world, we are so inundated with different degrees of toxicity. It can come from people, it can come from news, it can come from articles, it can come from the internet, it can come from people on the job. It can come from so many different places and so many different levels, and so many people are operating on that paradigm and within that energy field, and it begins to impact us on different ways, in different ways. And as a service to self, one of the things that is beautiful about nature is that when we go out into nature, nature automatically puts us at peace. And then it puts all of those things that maybe while we were in that rat race, we perceive to be so overwhelming, it just puts it and it says, wait a minute, it's not that big of a deal. Look at this beauty around you and compare it to that. Look at this beautiful tree. You know, look at how beautiful the sky is today. Look at these wonderful clouds.
Right.
You know,
right.
Look at that rabbit, because there's rabbits, and so look at that rabbit running by. You know, look at that stream flowing by, and look at how everything is in balance. And this is all Mother Nature showing us balance. And what happens is, in it's showing us balance, it gives us balance. And what people you'll find is that when you begin to engage in nature more, nature will bless you with degrees of balance. And then you can bring that balance to the world. And that's precisely what happens for me inside these videos, brother. It's like I get out there and I'm in my element. You know,
I see it come through, and it's powerful. No, it's powerful. It's powerful to see what you do, and I just feel that when we just see people who are in nature, it puts things in perspective, like you said, but it makes us appreciate life's abundance. Because a lot of us, when we talk of money, and when we talk of, sometimes we equate money with self-worth. You see, so the more money I have, the more self-worth I have. But once you're in nature, you realize that nature abundance is our natural state. You know, and all of this is man-made, and of course we have to play the game, but nature just realizes that we are no different from any other animal. That's what I get from nature. You know, and we have to respect every other life form on the planet equally.
Yes, and that's a beautiful thing about animals, because animals, they're not worried about things like human beings. When we're in this rat race, we get all worried about it. So nature tends to bring the calm, and it brings the peace, and it's the mother's way, Mother Earth, Mother Nature. It's her way of calming her children, so that when we get back out there into the world, we'll be adequately prepared to deal with the world. And ultimately, it's just like any other relationship, you know, baby to child. When the baby, or when the baby is upset about something and it's inundated maybe with an experience that it can't handle, and it starts to cry, mama picks the baby up and says, okay, and embraces baby, and baby, it comes into a state of balance. You know, well, Mother Earth does that for us too, but we have to embrace Mother Earth, and we have to spend the time out there. And what happened is, for anyone, if you ain't spending time in nature, you go out there and start spending time, at a certain point you're going to realize, look, oh, I've been missing out on this, and I want to be out here all the time. That's how I am. Okay, so I encourage people, even people who my premium members, I always tell them, if you can get out in nature, take a walk by the park, take a walk by the lake, by the stream, what have you, get out there, because it will put things in perspective. And then all of those worries, a lot of the worries that I have in life, and, you know, negative thoughts, they begin to be purified and put into their appropriate context. And then they don't even compare to the abundance, as you said so eloquently, the abundance that we experience in nature. And I think that abundance gives us the balance, because now we don't have to worry anymore, and we bring that level of abundance back to our families, back to our communities, and of course we share it on the internet. And I was inspired by you going out in nature doing your videos, so I'm doing it too.
Well, we're all each other's inspiration, and that's so powerful right now, because I feel we all have to reconnect, because so many of us, we feel we can just do it by ourselves, and united we thrive. If all of us band together, then we can really be a force to be reckoned with. But just thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. But just 5 quick questions. What I'll do is just say something, and then you just have to finish it off. To put you on the spot. Okay. Love comes when?
When you are ready.
The most amazing thing about life is?
The journey.
If you feel like giving up, just remember?
Ralph Smart.
Thank you. Water or fire?
Diving deep.
You become free when?
You realize the power is within.
Fantastic. Well, it's just been amazing, phenomenal just to reconnect with you, because I feel what you're doing is powerful. And what I've learned from you is the importance of the family structure. The love that you have for your family is out of this world. And I feel that you're a great example just as an infinite being to so many people out there. And please just leave us with whatever you want to share with us. For those that want to follow Lenon's work, go to www.lennonhonor.com and also lennonhonorfilms.com, YouTube Lennon Honor, Facebook Lennon Honor. Just Google Lennon Honor and you'll find Lennon Honor. So just leave the Infinite Waters family and the world at large with anything you want to leave us.
Yes, and I have to bring up the family part of this, and that is to say that one of the reasons why I have been so committed to my own personal growth and purification is because my life experience as a child was traumatizing. And a lot of that trauma came from the instabilities that were present in my family. So my father, my mother, their relationship, his volatility, his alcoholism, his drug addiction, his abuse, physical violence against my mother, even physical violence against his children. And I've experienced so much trauma. I've experienced so much death too. That's another dynamic. Growing up in Southern California in the 80s, the mid 80s, a lot of people, a lot of friends killed, gang violence, so forth and so on. And those things, they toxify us as children. And we come pure, but we have these experiences. That's why I'm saying the journey, it's about purification. And one of the reasons why family is so important is because one of the things I identified early on in my life was that I was going to do something different. It's like you use that term, infinite being. Infinite being also implies that this level of infinity is passed on to future generations so that it can indeed become infinite. You see?
Right.
So what my wife and I, what we do with our children is we are maintaining their purity, and we are providing them with a home environment that is based upon love, care, and affection. So they don't see what
You're
I
setting
saw.
a high standards.
That's right. That's right. Yes, but the standard that we set is it's doable and it's attainable, and
Right.
even higher levels are also attainable. But this also goes back to being in service to that which gave us life, the great Earth Mother. See, the family institution, what it allows us to do is to pass on the best of us to the next generation, so that the next generation doesn't necessarily have to start all over again. You know, when they get to the age of 25 and have an awakening, and they say something's not quite right with the world, and let me go on this quest. Now, in my journey now, from this point on, I can begin to look at things differently. Yeah, but now we have 25, 30 years, 35, 40, 50 years of our life experience that could have been also dedicated to that journey, that particular purification, that particular spiritual evolution. So the idea is for my wife, and that's why family is so important, is that if you do it right, if you establish a positive male-female relationship, and then you have children, you begin to build it over time, your children will be empowered to where from the time they step out onto the world stage, they've already started their journey towards spiritual illumination, towards spiritual consciousness, towards uplifting the species, not for themselves per se, but for the great Earth Mother. So that's why family is so important. And I want to reiterate, that's why the value of male-female relationships is so important, because that's the foundation of the family institution. My children, what they represent and what they will represent to the world is the infinite being, as you call it. And the beautiful thing is that the degree of what they produce for the earth and what they produce for all of humanity can also be built upon by the future generation that come out of them, meaning my grandchildren. But at some point, as a species, we have to take a stand on this. And how do we take a stand? We take a stand by simply saying, I'm going to purify myself to such a degree that I develop the internal gravity to where I can call unto me, without much effort on my part, a positive male-female relationship. And while operating within this positive male-female relationship, I will be faced with the mirror that shows the best of me and the worst of me, and I will purify the worst of me out of me, and I will embrace the best of me, and I will share the best of me with the world. And then out of this interaction within this male-female relationship, I will create children with my mate, and my children will be birthed into this new arrangement. And that's precisely what my wife and we have done. We homeschool our children. We home birthed our last 3 children. That means my wife and we gave birth to our last children at home, just me, my wife, and our children. I delivered those babies. That's empowerment. See, that's internalization of power.
Yes.
The first 2 we gave birth at a birthing center. We don't eat animals, and we instruct our children as to properly how to treat animals. Like, we're vegan, so we're teaching these really spiritual principles, and also become accountable for your life. You know, become fully responsible for yourself. Understand that your childhood suffering, that you can transcend the childhood suffering, that whatever traumas, this is for me, whatever traumas I've experienced, you can transcend that. That's for everyone else. Whatever traumas you experience in your life, you can transcend those traumas and you can become the infinite being. You are already the infinite being. The fact that you even got through all of that, the muck and the mire of that life experience, proves that you are an infinite being. It's an issue of internalizing that power now. And this is precisely what we're doing for our children, so that for them, they don't have to wait till they get to the age of 20, 25 and see a Ralph Smart video. You see what I'm saying? Then they say, oh,
Right.
wow, okay.
Right.
From the time that they're born until the time they come of age, they will already be in this journey. And then when they see Ralph Smart's video, they say, oh, I know him because I am him. And that's the goal. That's the goal with our family. That's why the family institution is so important. And then getting back to the male-female relationship, the foundation of it all is so important. And this all comes back to embracing your power and internalizing power. And also, don't do this just so that you become great. Do it so that you can help other people to become great. Because when you help other people to become great, now you're helping the earth to become great. And that's the earth's greatest dream, is please my children, who I've given life to and I've given spiritual contracts to, will you please help me in my spiritual journey too? That is the calling. And if we can get to that point as a species, brother, we're going to be all right. Okay.
Right. Well, you've done it because,
let me just say this.
right.
The family, what it does is that it reaches beyond our human experience right now. And now we're getting into infinity. Each generation we're progressing. And if we all make a commitment that each generation we're going to help and assist the next generation to build upon what we were, the best of what we gave to them, now we're reaching into infinity. And now we're getting into infinite waters that now, future generations can swim in, to where we're not necessarily drowning as a species. We're floating at the top, and we're also contributing to the spiritual evolution of the great Earth Mother.
Profoundly put. Profoundly put. And it's fantastic. I have so much respect that you are homeschooling your children, because working in a school, I know how much of an indoctrination system it is. And a lot of us, we say, well, I can't do anything about it. I also watched your video, The Illusion of College Degrees, and it's just fascinating how so many of us, we're searching, we're striving for achievement, and that also goes back to the externalization of power. And it's just amazing just to see individuals such as yourself not just talk about it, but actually put it into action, to start homeschooling your children, and you're seeing the results, which is fantastic.
Yes. And we do see the results. That's the one thing I can say, that, when I leave this planet, that my children, that my wife and I, we did the best that we could for our children. And that's what it's all about. And we can see it in our children. Anyone, if y'all ever see our children on any of these live video streams, our 9-year-old, 8-year-old, we have a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. If you sit and you watch them, you watch their mannerisms, you even watch how they talk and what they talk about, you will see, in terms of when we talk about infinite being, it is there in them. It's in all of us in the beginning. It's just different levels of traumatization toxify that. But what we do is now we purify that. We begin this process of purification. We quote unquote wake up, and then we say, wait a minute, I got some serious work to do, the personal work. You begin to refine that out of yourself, and then you begin to reclaim your power. You get back on track to being an infinite being and expressing that outwardly. The beautiful thing with our children is that it's maintained, and we're going to do our best to maintain it over time. And who knows, 20 years from now, what little Lenon will be doing, what Avi will be doing, what Saida will be doing, what Samaya will be doing, or what Baby J will be doing. That's what it's all about.
Amazing things are on the horizon. Infinite waters, we've been diving deep with the amazing Lenon Honor. And thank you to everyone out there as well. But please check out these brothers' work, www.lenonhonor.com. Thank you so much, Lenon, for taking time out of your busy schedule to dive with us.
Oh, anytime, brother. And I'm going to say it. I love you. I love you like a brother, man.
I love you too. I love you too like a brother.
Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And I'm going to say it again, brother. You are one of the few people, and people don't take this the wrong way, but you're one of the few people on the planet that when I see your work, it inspires me. Like, I am so inspired by it. So I want you to please, brother, continue what you're doing. You are doing phenomenal work. You're impacting people in very, very profound ways. I don't even think you realize yet. That's okay. You're going to realize it soon. I'll guarantee that. But you have been a personal inspiration to me and to my wife. And I look forward to the day where I can meet you in person and give you one big hug. It's going to be one of the biggest hugs you ever got in your life. I love you, brother.
Thank you. I love you too. And just continue the amazing work, because I feel you've done so much. And you might look back on your earlier work and said, okay, it's not the truest representation of who you are right now. But at the
Yeah.
same time, what you did back then was you set you lit the flame
Yes.
basically for people
Hmm.
to really just to wake up. And that's
And
why so many other people are doing videos. But what you're doing now is even more phenomenal because you are back into internalizing your power.
yes.
And yes, it's going to take some time because fear is addictive. Just on YouTube titles, you put any catchphrase, you're going to get so many views. But when you talk about empowerment and going within, nobody watches. So once we can all get out of this fear, that will be the top. That's what's happening right now. But it's just phenomenal what you're doing, and we all thank you because it's not easy doing this kind of work. Because at times, sometimes there may not be many of us to share the experience with. Because we have to remember that we're living in a whole world. Not everyone is even thinking about what we're talking about. They're thinking about the sports game. They're
That's
thinking
right.
about this game. So it's just phenomenal what you do, and also your Lenon is an amazing flute player, and we have to you have to come back if you would to talk about music and sound frequencies because that's another subject altogether, and just to see how music can be used to heal ourselves and
Yes.
how
Absolutely.
music is also being used to control the population.
Yes. Yes.
But
Absolutely.
once again, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone out there. Infinite Waters, diving deep once again. Stay well, stay healthy. Peace.